Well, good evening. Again, it's Frankly Speaking. My name is Frank Amiro, and I'm here today with a gentleman that's got some issues, and I kind of agree with him. And I understand he's a liberal, and that's not a problem for me because we're going to talk politics. So this is Mr. Dan Weeks. Dan, please say hello to the group and tell us all about your great organization here.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Frank.
No problem.
I'm with an organization called Open Democracy, and we're a New Hampshire organization that actually got started by a remarkable old New Hampshire lady, which some of your viewers may have met or heard about a couple of years ago, Doris Granny D. Haddock.
Oh, yeah.
A lady who lived in Dublin, New Hampshire. I grew up nearby in Temple, New Hampshire. And at the age of 88, she hatched the brilliant idea to walk across America to get big money out of politics. And Granny D, she'd read an article. She had always been a political activist and cared about issues, but had mostly worried about raising a family and working her job and all the rest. But she started to learn about something that was happening in Washington when she was in her late 80s. This was back in the 1990s. And one thing in particular kind of made the point for her. She read a story about how the tobacco industry, in the middle of the night, had slipped something into one of these big bills that go through Washington.
Yep.
And this was a big fat subsidy for the tobacco companies. And she realized that what was happening was these companies, and you can smoke or don't smoke, we can all agree that companies shouldn't be writing the laws and giving themselves payouts with taxpayer money. It should be a free market. It should be competition. And she realized that these companies, and as she started, she realized it wasn't just the tobacco companies, were essentially writing a lot of the legislation that was getting passed in Washington. And of course, it wasn't only companies. It was interest groups of one kind or another on the left and on the right.
Right.
And she realized that they were, a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they were the ones essentially influencing the laws that we all live under. And she said, this isn't right. And she first did what a lot of citizens do. She went to her desk and wrote a letter to her senator and her congressman. And she got a little form letter back in response. You know, nice, thank you, old lady, for your concern.
Right.
Here's a bit of boilerplate. Essentially, no response. And she started scratching her head. What could she do about it as an old lady without a lot of connections, without any public office, without any money to speak of, certainly not enough money to fund political campaigns and influence politics. And she decided that she had her health, even though she was 88, and she had her determination. And so in 1999, she flew out to Los Angeles, and she started a 3,200-mile walk across America for the idea that everybody should have a voice, and it shouldn't matter how much money you have when it comes to making your voice heard.
I remember when she did that walk. I remember that.
And she arrived in Washington a year and a half later at the age of 90.
God bless her. She was good.
And she marched up to the Capitol building with a couple thousand people in tow and all the national media. And she demanded that our Congress do something about this big money that was flooding our politics. And I had the good fortune, I was a high school student at the time, out in Conval High School in Peterborough.
Mm-hmm.
And she came and talked to our high school after completing her walk. And she kind of lit a fire under me. You know, I was just starting to think about politics, to learn a little bit about the issues, and you know, I figured, well, I love the outdoors, so I'm probably an environmentalist, and you know, I care about people, so I wanted, you know, people to have good paying jobs, and you know, one issue after the other, I thought, you know, that sounds good, I believe in that. And she helped me to understand that if there was ever going to be the chance that government would address big problems that our country faces, we had to solve an underlying problem, kind of a cancer underneath our whole political system.
Right.
And that's the big money in politics.
You think there's big money in politics? Don't smile. I'm laughing already. We know there
My
is.
Lord.
That's right.
We just got through an election here in New Hampshire in 2014 where close to $100 million was spent
Jeez.
in our little state of 1.3 million people. And most of that money came from out of state.
Yeah.
A whole lot of that money was secret. We don't even know who spent it,
Jeez.
but we know how it was spent. It was spent in the most disgusting, negative, down in the gutter sort of way with these thousands upon thousands of TV ads, 90% of them negative.
Right.
And this is just, you ask any citizen, my view as well, it's disgusting. It's wrong. It's not what our founders intended. And so we've got to do something about the money. And where Granny D comes in, the reason I wanted to share her story, which is always so inspiring to me, is that she shows how citizens who don't have the big money and a lot of power can do something. And it's her walks. She founded this organization, Open Democracy, 6 years ago. And she inspired us and hundreds of New Hampshire citizens just this month, a couple weeks ago in January, to walk across New Hampshire in something that we're calling the New Hampshire Rebellion.
Right.
And this rebellion is inspired by our own Constitution. Article 10 of the New Hampshire Constitution says that when government, which is established in order to represent the interests and the needs of all people, not just the private interests of a single man or family or small group, all the people, when government stops representing all the people, according to our own state constitution in Article 10, we the people have a right and a responsibility to rebel, to reform the old government or establish a new one. And so we decided, in the footsteps of Granny D, we would take to the streets of New Hampshire. And on January 11th, we set off from Dixville Notch. A week later, we had teams of walkers joining in Keene, Portsmouth, and Nashua. And over 10 days, 300 miles, we had hundreds of citizens of New Hampshire and neighboring states marching in the freezing cold to Concord.
I watched them in, I guess it was Northwood, Route 4.
That's
I guess
right.
that was Portsmouth. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, wow. And I saw the signs, and I'm like, look at these people. And it was cold.
It was freezing.
It was. Yes, it was.
But we made a point, and we hope to keep making a point. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the continuation of these marches that we have planned.
Sure.
And that is that people are really fed up. It kind of feels like our votes, like our republic itself is for sale. Whoever's got the most money, they get the biggest say.
I'm agreeing with you all the way. And, what you were saying with the commercial ads. I come from Mount Vernon, New York, home of the First Amendment. And you have a right to freedom of speech and expression, as long as it's the truth. If I go and say, he's got red hair because he gets paid $1,000 a minute to have it, you say that's a lie. But I can put it in the newspaper, you see? I can put that in the newspaper. But under the Bill of Rights, I can't unless it's true. I got to have documentation of facts. Judge Scalia, with the Supreme Court Justice, made a statement about, I think it was about 2 years ago. He says, things have changed. And I'm like, how can you change that? And he was saying that the Supreme Court went and made a thing. You can say what you want under freedom of speech, and if it's not true, then you can challenge it. Well, that's not the way the Bill of Rights was written. You cannot say it unless it's true. And the way it was written, to me, was proper, because if I made a statement about you that's a lie, or you made one about me that's a lie, you got PAC money, you got all that money you were discussing that's coming in, just blowing out the door, making lies up, and I don't have money to do it. And if I go to the newspaper or the press or whatever you want to call it, the media, TV, anything, I might get this much, or on page 97 underneath. That's not the way the Bill of Rights comes from. I know, my hometown knows it. And people like Denzel Washington, who's very famous, comes from Mount Vernon, New York. He knows it. We know it. And that's what's wrong, and that's why I was glad that I met with you folks a couple of days ago, the men and women. And like I say, you're a liberal who was a conservative, who's a Republican, who's this, who's that. And it's about people saying, we're Americans, we are a republic for which the flag stands, and nobody is abiding by the Constitution. And I ask people, I'll give them the 4 questions, okay? William Taft, Barry Goldwater, Barack Obama, John McCain. Which 1, 2, 3, or 4 was legal to seek the office of president of these United States of America? Look it up, check it, read the Constitution, not the modified versions, the actual Constitution. You must be born within these United States of America. So you look it up and you find out if they were all legal, if one was legal or wasn't. And you'll be shocked and you'll say, oh my God, what happened to America? And that's how I look at it. So what are some of the other marches you're going to be doing or programs or whatever?
Yeah. So we want to engage as many citizens as we possibly can in this issue. As you know,
And it doesn't matter what party.
absolutely. We are bipartisan, nonpartisan. We need all sides in, and this is one issue where I've got friends on the right, I've got friends to the left of me, and in the middle.
Good.
We don't all agree on individual issues,
Exactly.
but we agree that the system is broken and that our ability to address one issue or the other, left or right, we've got no chance in the current system we have because it's all about the money. And we intend, as you know, primary season is here. The presidential candidates are already making their trips to New Hampshire, and in the year ahead, we'll see them every week coming through our state. And we have a pretty unique opportunity, as you know, in New Hampshire, and I think a responsibility with it, to put this issue on the table and to ask every presidential candidate, what specific reforms will they support to end this system of big money corruption? And the way we want to do that is, first of all, to educate the people of New Hampshire. We had hundreds of people joining us on the march and rallying with us at the State House on January 21st, a few weeks ago.
Right.
But we need to take it to every community in the state. So far, we walked through 47 towns. That's about 37% of the state population. We want to go to many more towns. And so in the year ahead, between now and primary day next January or February, we are going to many different parts of the state. We're doing shorter marches of just a day with our signs, with our New Hampshire Rebellion. We're doing longer marches. This July 4th, we plan to march the seacoast of New Hampshire in Portsmouth and the surrounding towns. And we are, first of all, encouraging citizens to just come out and get some exercise and rebel against this big money. Because the public, the press will notice when hundreds or even thousands of people are inconveniencing themselves enough to get out and make their voice heard.
If there's
And the
20
candidates will
people, the
notice.
press isn't coming out. If there's 1,000, it's not. But if there's 100,000, they will. You know, and it's great. And I think, you know, the general public, you know, I meet lots of people in my day, and many people are aggravated. And I think I said it on some other programs as well. A real Republican and a real Democrat, they don't even vote anymore. They go independent, and then it's extreme right, extreme left. And I don't know how somebody can say they're a liberal and voting Democrat or a conservative voting Republican. If you're a Republican, you vote Republican, Democrat, Democrat. And I don't think extreme right or left should be taken over anything. And that's just the way I see it, you know. And I've always said it, where I grew up in New York, a real Republican and a real Democrat work together and you work things out. And that's like last week I did a program with the Speaker of the House, Sean Jasper. And Sean is good. A lot of people have issues with him. Sean works with people. That's what you need to do, is work with people. And I'm sure you know, in our republic, that the president doesn't spend every day in the White House. Congress doesn't spend it all in the congressional thing, whether it's the Senate or the House. It was more or less like a part-time position, but now it's full-time. And there's all kinds of money, and I'm sorry, I'm not for Feingold and McCain with the PAC money, because whoever's got the money is getting what they want, and he or she doesn't get what they need. Taxes are going up, programs on TV are going up. There's, what, 5 minutes of TV program and 4 minutes of commercials, or is it 6 and 5? What do you need all those commercials for?
Yeah. Let me give you an example of how this really is a cross-cutting issue that when you ask the American people, 96% agree, according to the polls. Healthcare is a very important issue in American politics, obviously.
Right.
You know, you can debate Obamacare and other provisions, but I want to mention one in particular that I think really makes the point that we've got to do something about this big money system of funding elections. Back in 2003, Congress passed the Medicare prescription drug benefit, Medicare Part D. Not a bad idea. A lot of Americans agreed, members of Congress agreed that there should be some coverage for prescription drugs for folks who are retired on Medicare. But when it came to actually writing the laws, this particular bill, by all accounts, it was the pharmaceutical lobbyists who spend between $100 and $300 million a year lobbying the government,
Yep.
and who give between $50 and $100 million a year in campaign contributions. They were the ones who wrote the bill. And they slipped one particular provision into the bill, which ultimately passed. And this was to say the government, Uncle Sam, which is the biggest purchaser of prescription drugs in the world through Medicare, does not have the right to negotiate discounts. They have to pay the full sticker retail price. Now, funnily enough, for a long time now, the same government, U.S. government under Veterans Affairs, has been purchasing large quantities of medications for veterans. And like any bulk buyer would do, if I was buying billions of pills, I would negotiate for a discount. They've been negotiating discounts to give taxpayers a decent rate. But under this new law, which would be purchasing much more, the government, it became illegal for our government to negotiate discounts when providing prescription drugs to folks on Medicare. The cost, the additional cost of this provision versus what our government pays under Veterans Affairs is in the tens of billions of dollars per year. In other words, a huge giveaway to an industry that spends millions or a few hundred million lobbying. They're getting tens of billions of dollars in return on their investment because they've written the law. And in fact, the congressman who pushed this law through, shortly after the law passed, he retired right in the middle of his term, and he took a job paying $3 million a year as the chief lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry. But it wasn't just this one congressman who, I mean, that looks like corruption to me, if you ask me.
Right.
It was the fact that the system is one where an industry, you know, we believe in fair competition, a free market, where, you know, competition is good and monopoly is bad, and if you are a big company, you shouldn't be able to change the rules of the game so that no other company can come in and compete with you. But we have a system where big companies, the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, writes the rules of the game to make it all but impossible for, you know, government to get a good deal, for others to compete with them, really undermining the very ideas of a free market, and in the process costing the taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. And the reason that they have that seat at the table and actually get to write the legislation is because our members of Congress are not dependent on the people. They're dependent on the money.
And when you say members of Congress, it's the Senate and the House.
Absolutely.
Because when they say a congressman, they think it's, you know, a congressman is the House. But a congressman is the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
And some people probably don't know that the U.S. Senate, the Senate recognizes the state they're from, and the representatives represent the people. And right now, I agree with what you said, they're not representing anybody except, oh, give me some more money, give me some more money. And what is it, in 2 terms, within 4 years, you can retire? And I heard there was a congressman that had $8,000 in the bank, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and now this member of Congress has, I believe, $45 million. I mean, come on, if you're working 24/7 in Congress, how are you making that money if you're only getting $200,000 a year or whatever it is now? So I don't like that. And I heard just recently, somebody I know that deals with the state of New Hampshire, and as you know, I was a state rep, but I wasn't aware of it because we didn't take kickbacks as representatives. We took the $100 a year, we paid the taxes, and we did what we were supposed to do, most of us. But the state Senate in New Hampshire, the state, I understand that lobbyists can be in there and give lobby money right to the senators. I'm like, what? Why are they doing that? So they're getting paid $100 a year and you think they're really earning their money, but they're getting money? Where is that money going? To me, it's just not right. So
I look at members of Congress, both the House and Senate, and it seems to me, I've never been there myself, but it seems to me a lot of them have good intentions.
there's some good ones.
They want to do some good. Maybe they lose that over time. But they're in a system where, in order to get reelected, average member of Congress, average member of the House, has to raise $1.5 to $2 million to win. Some of them a lot more. Average member of the Senate, $10 to $12 million. Some of them a lot more. And they are literally spending, the studies say, between 30 and 70% of their working hours, not just during election time, but throughout their term in office, throughout their 2 years for the House or 6 years for the Senate. They're spending between 30 and 70% of their time raising money.
Yep.
And they're raising it not from their constituents by and large. And when I started to study this issue, I asked myself, all right, so we have privately funded elections. Well, who's actually providing the money? We know the pharmaceutical lobby is one. When you look at the percentage of Americans who fund campaigns today, it's tiny. 0.024% of our population. So a tiny fraction of 1% of the American people provide most of the money that funds politics.
Right, because they're busy with taxes, they're busy with health care, they're busy with their mortgages and everything else. There's very few jobs left in our nation. So where do they get it? And you're right. So where are these people getting all the money? It's from somebody up there that throws down a big lump sum. And I agree with you. And that's why lots of people don't even want to vote today. And I tell them, go vote so your vote is not fixed. People serve in the United States Armed Forces to defend your right that you have that right to vote. In New York, we used to laugh. We say, oh, I don't like him or her. And we say, okay, vote for Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck. And then in New York, they made it a law. You can't vote for Mickey Mouse. But you can put your own name in there. And that's fine.
Yeah.
You have that right. So I agree with you with this. The PAC money is just ludicrous. Paul Gosar, who's a dentist out in Arizona, excellent member of Congress in the House of Representatives, he gets things done. He's not just a talker. There was Gabby was her name. She ran against the Democrat down around the Tucson area. The Republican House would not even help her with one penny. Now, how can you say you're a Republican, you're not helping a Republican? How can you say you're a Democrat, not helping a Democrat? I mean, if they're in your party, you should give them something. Do something to help them. So I have to agree with you. I'm not for this lobbying. And Feingold and McCain with the PAC thing, the best person does not win. And I did a campaign a couple of years ago. I was talking to a candidate. I said, you're going to run, you're going to run, you're going to run. Well, I'll see, I don't know, this, that. And I said, you got to bring out the facts. You can't wait until just before the election. So I went and I did an exploratory. A month later, the person went and ran. And I'm like, oh, geez, I ain't going to pull out now. I'll keep it going. I said, but bring up the facts. Nobody brought up the facts. And I got into a debate, and somebody goes, you're the only one that answered the question. I said, thank you. Now you understand why I did it. I didn't do it to win. Oh, if I would have won, there would have been a change. But I'm not that way, you know. And I don't do things to go like this, pat myself on the back. But I like discussing issues. That's why I have you here. That's why I had the Speaker of the House here. That's why I had the Veterans Flicks here. I like people. You got to deal with it. In my campaign, the last time, it was results, not promises. Don't tell me what you're going to do. That's like in Arizona. They all talked about the border. None of them knew how to do it except one guy, Frank Riggs. He was a member of Congress, and he was a military policeman, and he understood because he put the wall from California into Yuma, Arizona. So he knew what he was doing, and he only did 3 terms and he got out. It wasn't about patting himself on the back. So people need to see who the real candidate is. And you know, I'm sure you know, and everybody watching here, you get tired of the phone calls, you get tired of the ads, and everybody's making money, and you're not getting the best candidate for you to serve you properly. That's what's hurting. This whole nation is going down, down, down. I don't like it. I like your group, whether it's Open Democracy or New Hampshire Rebellion, I don't care. They're all working together. I thought it was fantastic. I don't know if they'll push you to the side. You don't know. But,
Not if we have our say about it.
well, exactly. And you got to get the word out. And that's why I'm glad you're here this evening discussing it. And people, no matter what party you're with, do the right thing for the people in your party. Just don't vote for somebody because they're in the party and you think you know they're good. Be careful. That's all. And we got a candidate now that people don't even know. He's from New Hampshire. And he's running for president. And he's a combat fighter pilot. And I doubt he's got a shot because he's not going to have the campaign money. But he's a combat fighter pilot. And his name is Christopher Hill. You'll probably meet him up here. And you discuss things with him. And I think you'll see he gives you results.
You know, one thing you talk about how you become a candidate, and you've had some experience. When I've talked to people who've run for office, especially for Congress, what I hear is when it comes to thinking about running, the questions they get asked are not, what do you stand for? What's your experience?
Right.
Do you have integrity? The questions they get asked, two questions over and over again. Do you have it or can you raise it?
So I think you're
It's
right.
all about the money.
You're
And
right.
if you can't show, you know, a couple $100,000 out of the gate running for Congress or
Off to the
Senate,
side.
you know, the media won't even talk to you, except good community TV shows like this.
Right.
And so I'm deeply concerned. You know, I hope to raise a family here in New Hampshire.
Good.
I want my kids to inherit a good world that I'm proud of. I'm very proud to be living here. And yet I'm deeply concerned that we're just not getting to some big problems that our country faces because our politicians are so consumed in the money. And they've got to spend so many of their waking hours raising the money. And the money comes from this tiny sliver of Americans who, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, their interests are different from most of Americans.
You're exact.
And that's something we've got to change. So we hope that citizens across New Hampshire will join this New Hampshire Rebellion. Will
Good.
march with us. We'll visit the website, which is nhrebellion.org.
All right,
Sign
we'll
up.
put it on the end of the video.
Sign up to join one of the walks. We're speaking around New Hampshire at Rotary clubs and schools and universities. And one thing that is very important, as we talked about briefly at the beginning, is the presidential candidates. You know, we need leadership on this issue. We need the next president to say enough with the big money.
Exactly.
Even if they spend a lot of money getting elected, that's the system we've got. We need the next president to say enough and to make this their first issue once in office. And that's where New Hampshire can really play an important role by, at every stop they make on the stump over the next 12 months, asking them this question: what specific reforms will they support to end the system of corruption of money in politics?
Well, God bless you and thank you. And I hope you people all understand what this gentleman said. Thank you, and don't forget to vote. Good evening.